I remember the day as if it were carved into the very fabric of my soul. A day when pride was shattered and a dark resolve was born. In the heart of a bustling, glamorous city stood a grand hotel with marble floors, opulent chandeliers, and an air of indifference that only the rich and powerful could claim. It was there that the cruel hand of fate first marked me, a simple, unassuming man with dreams too big for the narrow alleys of my upbringing. I had entered that hotel seeking nothing more than a brief respite from a life filled with modest hopes, only to be ensnared in a spectacle of public humiliation orchestrated by a man who reveled in his arrogance. His name was Zane, a man whose wealth and influence were as vast as the disdain he held for those he deemed beneath him. In a single, merciless moment, Zane had dismantled my dignity before the eyes of the world. His venomous words, laced with contempt and cruelty, echoed in the lavish lobby as if to announce that my life was forever tainted by the stain of failure. In the days that followed, every mirror seemed to reflect that ignoble episode. The echoes of jeering laughter haunted me in every silent moment, and the memory of that humiliating encounter festered within me like a dark seed. But within that seed lay a promise of retribution. I vowed silently that one day, fortune would twist the knife back into the heart of my oppressor. That day, as I began to rebuild my shattered existence, I nurtured a cold and calculating determination. I dedicated myself to learning the subtle arts of commerce, strategy, and human psychology. I walked the labyrinth of society's underbelly, absorbing every secret that could someday be wielded as a weapon against those who had once laughed at my misfortune. Years passed in a blur of hardship, sweat, and solitary contemplation. I toiled in menial jobs, studied the intricate dance of fortunes, and slowly began to understand that life's grand stage was filled with unpredictable twists. Fate, it seemed, had already marked the pages of my destiny with the ink of vengeance. I became a silent observer of the world's great masquerade, watching as fortunes rose and fell like the tide. Each setback, every slight, and each snicker behind my back added layers to the resolve that now guided my every step. I was no longer a man defined by his past humiliation. I had become something else entirely, a man transformed by the fire of his own determination. Then, one crisp autumn evening, as the wind whispered secrets through the city's narrow streets, fate delivered a revelation that left me momentarily breathless. I had received word that the very hotel where my dignity had been shattered was hosting a lavish gala, a celebration of success, of opulence, of an empire built on the miseries of others. My heart pounded with a mix of apprehension and anticipation as I approached the familiar entrance. Every step I took resonated with the memories of that long-ago day. Every echo on the polished floor was a reminder of how far I had come. Yet, as I stepped into the grand lobby, an almost surreal sensation enveloped me, a feeling that destiny was about to unveil a final, dramatic twist. The transformation of the hotel was nothing short of astounding. What had once been a stage for Zane's cruelty had now become a monument to his own ambition. The opulence had been amplified. Every corner of the vast structure now spoke of a meticulous reinvention. And then, amidst the swirling crowd of society's glitterati, I caught sight of him, Zane himself. No longer the brash, untouchable man I had once despised, he now carried the air of a man burdened by responsibility and pride, a man whose gaze betrayed an inner conflict, a flicker of shame that danced behind his eyes when he met mine. It was as if the hotel, with all its magnificence, had become an extension of his soul, a soul now weighed down by the very arrogance that had once set him on the path of cruelty. My mind raced back to that fateful day, the cruel laughter, the piercing stares, and the sense of utter powerlessness. But now I stood transformed, not as a man bent by humiliation, but as one who had sculpted his own destiny from the raw material of suffering. In that charged moment, the silence between us spoke volumes. I felt no need for words, for every fiber of my being resonated with the weight of accumulated years and hard-won experience. The gala, the luxury, the indulgence. It all receded into a background murmur compared to the symphony of destiny that was about to reach its crescendo. I began to recall every painstaking moment that led me here. The hours spent studying the intricate language of finance. The nights when sleep was a distant memory as I planned each calculated step towards my long-awaited retribution. Every decision, every sacrifice was woven into the tapestry of my resolve. It was in these silent, determined hours that I had constructed the blueprint of my revenge, not through overt violence, but through a slow, inexorable reclamation of power and dignity. The irony was not lost on me. The man who had once used his wealth as a weapon of degradation was now ensnared in the very web of ambition and pride that he had once wielded carelessly. As the evening wore on, the tension in the air grew palpable. Every smile, every gesture of cordiality exchanged among the guests carried an undercurrent of unspoken awareness. I could see the subtle glances, the furtive nods, as if the room itself was bracing for the revelation that had been silently building over the years. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, a prelude to an act of cosmic balance, an inevitable correction to the scales of injustice that had been tipped so long ago. Zane's eyes, once gleaming with condescension, now betrayed an unmistakable vulnerability. He moved through the crowd with a certain hesitancy, as if every step was a painful reminder of the choices he had made. And then, in a moment that seemed both fleeting and eternal, our eyes met again. In that instant, the layers of the past melted away, leaving only the raw, unvarnished truth of our intertwined destinies. There was a silent acknowledgement, an unspoken challenge that passed between us, one that demanded neither words nor gestures, but promised that the reckoning, long delayed, was finally at hand. I advanced slowly, each step measured and deliberate, as if the weight of my journey lent gravity to my movements. The room fell into an almost hypnotic hush, and every whisper of silk and murmur of conversation faded into the background. In the midst of this grand, orchestrated spectacle of wealth and power, I had become the embodiment of a singular, inexorable truth: that pride, no matter how towering, can crumble beneath the relentless pressure of time and fate. A memory surfaced, unbidden, a memory of the moment I first realized that revenge was not merely an act of retribution, but a journey of self-discovery. I recalled the long nights spent in solitude, poring over dusty ledgers and obscure texts, unraveling the secrets of financial empires and societal structures. Each page I turned, each theory I mastered, was a step away from the man I once was, a man diminished by humiliation, and a step toward the person I was destined to become. It was not enough to merely avenge. I had to transcend, to transform my pain into a power that would reverberate far beyond the walls of that hotel. Now, standing before him, every carefully laid plan crystallized into reality. The very air seemed to vibrate with the energy of what was to come. I recalled the countless setbacks that had once threatened to break my spirit, the times when hope had been a flickering flame, barely surviving the storms of despair. Yet in each of those moments, I had discovered an inner reservoir of strength that propelled me forward. With every challenge, I had grown more resilient, more determined. And now, as fate had gathered all the scattered fragments of my past into this singular, fateful moment, I felt an overwhelming surge of purpose. I could see that Zane was aware of my presence. His eyes, shimmering with a mix of apprehension and recognition, darted around as if searching for an escape. But escape was impossible in that gilded cage of his own making. The gala continued around us, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding at its heart, while I prepared to deliver the final act of a performance that had been in the making for years. It was then that I began to speak, not in a loud, boisterous tone, but in a measured, resonant voice that carried the weight of years and experience. My words, though soft, cut through the silence like a finely honed blade. I spoke of fate and consequence, of the delicate balance between pride and humility. I spoke of the journey of a man who had once been broken, only to rise again from the ashes of his despair. I recounted, in subtle hints and veiled references, the countless nights spent plotting the reclamation of a dignity that had been stolen by cruelty. Each word was carefully chosen, each pause laden with meaning, and the audience, captivated whether they knew it or not, listened with rapt attention. As my monologue continued, the atmosphere in the grand lobby shifted imperceptibly, yet irrevocably. The lights, the music, even the gentle murmur of conversation seemed to slow, as if time itself was bending to the gravity of the moment. I recalled the words of a long-forgotten sage, whose voice had once echoed in my dreams. True power is not in the might of one's arm, but in the courage to rise when all seems lost. In that moment, those words resonated with a clarity that transcended the bounds of mere memory, infusing my speech with a purpose that could not be ignored. I detailed the lessons I had learned, the myriad ways in which life had taught me that revenge is not a fire to be kindled in anger, but a steady flame that burns with the purity of truth. My voice grew stronger, more insistent, as I recounted how I had reclaimed every scrap of my dignity. Each victory a small rebellion against the injustice that had once defined me. I described the transformation of my inner world, the slow but unstoppable metamorphosis of a spirit battered by humiliation into one tempered by resolve and wisdom. And in doing so, I did not merely recount my past. I laid bare the blueprint of a future where arrogance would no longer reign unchecked. It was in the midst of this unfolding revelation that I noticed Zane's expression falter, a subtle, yet unmistakable, crumbling of the facade he had so carefully constructed. The grandeur of the moment, the swirling elegance of the gala, all seemed to converge upon that singular, trembling moment in his eyes. I saw there a glimmer of regret, of recognition for the countless misdeeds that had brought him to this crossroads. His posture, once erect with pride, now slumped ever so slightly, as if the weight of his own conscience was finally catching up with him. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the time had come for the final reckoning. The silence grew deeper still, enveloping the room in an almost sacred hush. The moment stretched out infinitely, as if the universe itself paused to witness the collision of two destinies, one forged in cruelty and excess, the other in quiet, unyielding perseverance. I advanced a few more steps, my eyes locked with his, each step an affirmation of every sacrifice I had made, every tear I had shed. In that charged space, words became redundant. All that remained was the raw, undeniable truth that the cycle of humiliation and revenge was drawing to its inevitable climax. I reached the center of the marble floor, where the reflections of countless chandeliers danced like spirits of the past, and with a calm determination, I let the final truth fall from my lips, a truth that had been the guiding star of my entire existence. I spoke not of vengeance as a mere act of retribution, but as a means of restoring balance, of reclaiming the dignity that had been denied to me on that fateful day. I said that true power lay not in the suffering of others, but in the transformation of pain into a force that could reshape one's destiny. I declared that every slight, every moment of humiliation had been the very crucible in which my resolve was forged. At that instant, the silence shattered like fragile glass. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembled guests, and all eyes turned toward Zane. His face, once an impassive mask of superiority, was now a canvas on which the vivid hues of regret and shame were unmistakably painted. The transformation was complete, a metamorphosis born not of luck, but of the inexorable power of perseverance and the relentless pursuit of justice. The man who had once wielded his wealth as a weapon now found himself unarmed in the presence of a force that transcended mere riches, a force that was the culmination of every moment of pain and every triumph over adversity. In that charged moment, the weight of the past and the promise of the future coalesced into a singular, unforgettable truth, that every action, Every choice had led us both to this defining instant. The opulent surroundings, the glittering lights, and the soft strains of music all bore silent witness to the inevitability of fate's intricate design. And as I stood there, not as a man seeking petty revenge, but as one who had reclaimed his very soul, I could see that Zane, his eyes now downcast, his spirit visibly diminished, had no choice but to confront the reflection of his own deeds. The gala, once a celebration of unchecked excess, had become the arena for a cosmic justice. In that moment, every whispered secret of the past, every regret hidden behind a veneer of wealth, converged to reveal a truth that neither of us could escape. The cycle of humiliation and revenge was not a closed chapter, but an eternal dance, a dance in which the roles of oppressor and oppressed could, in an instant, be reversed by the inexorable hand of destiny. That charged moment in the opulent lobby sparked a cascade of memories and emotions that surged through my mind like the first notes of an epic symphony. The silence that had engulfed the room was no longer merely an absence of sound. It had transformed into a living, breathing presence, an emissary of destiny that carried with it the weight of every long-forgotten sorrow and every hard-won victory. Every step I took further into the heart of that grand hall rekindled the past and the present, entwined like the strands of an ancient tapestry woven with threads of regret and retribution. Zane, the man who once reveled in his public display of cruelty, now seemed reduced to a mere shadow of the person he once was. His eyes, once alight with the arrogance of the mighty, now shimmered with a vulnerability that was impossible to ignore. I watched as he tried, in vain, to conceal the storm of emotions roiling behind his gaze. His hands trembled ever so slightly when he reached for his glass of champagne, as though the very act of holding on such a symbol of his former power was now an insurmountable challenge. The guests, still unaware of the true gravity of the moment unfolding before them, continued their chatter, their laughter, and their idle glances. Yet, for those who looked deeper, the shift in atmosphere was unmistakable, a silent ripple of disquiet that hinted at the inevitability of change. It was as if the universe had conspired to pause in a breathless instant, waiting for the final act in this drama of pride and penance to unfold. I moved through the sea of elegantly attired figures, each step resonating with the memories of a man who had once been crushed under the weight of humiliation. With every footfall, I recalled the nights I'd spent in solitude, poring over endless books of strategy and finance, meticulously planning the day when I would reclaim not only my honor, but also the very dignity that had been stripped from me so mercilessly. The hotel, in its current guise of modern luxury, was more than just a venue. It was a stage for destiny, a monument to the triumph of persistence over cruelty. As I approached a quiet alcove near the grand staircase, I found a momentary refuge from the expectant eyes of the gathering. There, amidst the soft murmur of discreet conversations and the ambient glow of crystal chandeliers, I allowed my thoughts to flow unburdened by the expectations of the present. I recalled the moment when I had first encountered Zane's cruelty, a moment seared into my memory with a pain that was as vivid as it was transformative. The memory had been my tormentor for years, a constant reminder of a time when I was nothing more than an object of ridicule. Yet, in that very moment, it had also sparked a fire, a desire for retribution that was both dark and resolute. The path I had chosen was not one of violent retribution, but a slow, measured dismantling of the injustice that had so long defined me. Every lesson in economics, every encounter with the harsh realities of the world's unforgiving hierarchies had been a stepping stone towards the destiny that now beckoned me. I had learned that true power was not derived from the ability to harm, but from the capacity to transform pain into an indomitable strength. And so, with a mind sharpened by years of silent resolve, I had built a plan, an intricate web of calculated moves that would eventually corner Zane into a confrontation with the truth of his own making. As the evening deepened, subtle cues began to emerge among the guests. whispers of admiration for the enigmatic stranger, whose eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to defy the superficial charm of the glittering soiree, began to spread. It was as if my presence had awakened something long dormant among the assembled elites, the collective recognition that every empire of arrogance, no matter how grand, was destined to crumble beneath the weight of its own hubris. I could sense that the guests, though still immersed in their own revelries, were instinctively aware that history was about to take an unexpected turn. My internal monologue was interrupted by the gentle but insistent sound of footsteps approaching. I turned to see an elderly man, his face etched with the lines of time and wisdom, his eyes reflecting both the joy and sorrow of a lifetime. He had watched the proceedings with a quiet intensity, as though he understood the significance of every silent exchange, every fleeting glance. In his presence, I felt a kinship, a silent acknowledgement that he, too, had witnessed the ebb and flow of fortunes, the rise and fall of those who dared to defy the natural order. "You have come a long way, my friend," the old man said softly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. "It is not every day that one sees the past and present collide so seamlessly." His words, though simple, resonated deeply within me, reaffirming that my journey was not one of vengeance alone, but of transformation, a metamorphosis that had changed the very essence of my being. The old man's words were a quiet benediction, a reminder that my quest was not solely about settling old scores, but about reclaiming the dignity that had been denied to me for so long. In that moment, I resolved that my actions would not be driven by desire to merely see Zane crumble. Instead, I sought to expose the hypocrisy of a system that allowed the mighty to trample upon the weak, and in doing so, offer a glimmer of hope to all who had ever suffered under the weight of unjust pride. With renewed determination, I stepped out of the alcove and rejoined the throng of guests. The atmosphere had shifted further, a palpable tension that electrified the air and hinted at the transformative events that were about to unfold. I made my way slowly towards the center of the room, where the grand staircase arched elegantly, a silent sentinel to the unfolding drama. Each step was deliberate, every movement imbued with a sense of purpose that belied the calm exterior I presented to the world. In the midst of the crowd, I caught sight of a group of well-dressed individuals huddled near a richly adorned table. Their hushed tones and furtive glances suggested that they were aware of something beyond the ordinary festivities, a current of change that was beginning to ripple through the fabric of the evening. I felt a stirring of anticipation deep within me, a recognition that the moment of reckoning was drawing near. I could see that many of them had experienced their own quiet sufferings, their own battles with injustice, and perhaps they too longed for a moment when the scales of power might finally be balanced. The minutes passed in a surreal haze, a delicate dance of anticipation and subtle defiance. I could feel my heartbeat synchronizing with the pulse of the hotel itself, each thump echoing like a drumbeat heralding the culmination of years of silent struggle. And then, as if guided by an unseen hand, the lights in the lobby began to dim ever so slightly, drawing every eye towards the central area where fate was poised to strike. The soft strains of melancholic melody filled the space, a gentle, haunting tune that seemed to capture the essence of every longing heart in the room. In that ethereal moment, the surroundings took on an almost otherworldly quality. The flicker of candlelight, the soft shimmer of satin dresses, and the quiet murmur of whispered conversations all seemed to coalesce into a singular, poignant tableau. And at the center of this tableau stood Zane, his posture stiff, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. It was as if the universe had set the stage for a final confrontation, a confrontation that would strip away the layers of pretense and reveal the raw, unvarnished truth of our intertwined fates. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every past injustice, every lost opportunity, and every moment of painful transformation converge into a singular point of focus. This was the moment that would decide not only my destiny, but also the fate of a man who had once wielded cruelty as a weapon of power. My voice, when it emerged, was both gentle and resolute, a soft but unyielding current of truth that cut through the cacophony of superficial pleasantries. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my tone measured and deliberate. Tonight, we are not merely gathered to celebrate success and wealth, but to witness the enduring truth that every action has its consequence. In the grand tapestry of life, every moment of pain is but a thread, one that, when woven with perseverance, creates a fabric of unassailable strength. The words, though spoken with quiet confidence, rippled through the room like a clarion call, a reminder that the masks of the affluent and the powerful were often as brittle as they were dazzling. I could see nods of recognition among the audience, a silent agreement that beneath the veneer of luxury lay stories of suffering, resilience, and, ultimately, redemption. As I continued to speak, the air seemed to shimmer with the promise of a revelation. I recounted, in measured tones, the journey of a man who had once been cast aside, whose spirit had been crushed under the weight of public humiliation, yet had emerged transformed by the fires of determination and intellect. My narrative was not one of cold vengeance, but of a reawakening, a return to the fundamental truth that every human soul, when tested by the hardships of life, harbors an indomitable strength that can rise to any challenge. The room fell into a reflective silence as I painted a picture of the many long, solitary nights filled with quiet determination. Nights when the only sound was the steady beating of my heart and the relentless hum of distant dreams. I spoke of the meticulous strategies, the quiet sacrifices, and the hidden triumphs that had slowly built the edifice of my retribution. It was not merely a story of revenge, but of an inner revolution, a transformation that redefined the very concept of honor and power. In that luminous pause, I noticed Zane's features shift once again. His eyes, now brimming with a cocktail of regret, fear, and reluctant admiration, met mine across the distance. For a brief moment, the roles were reversed. Where once I had been the object of ridicule, he now appeared as the one stripped of his ill-gotten authority. The Grand Hotel, with all its opulence and splendor, had become the crucible in which his pride was melting away, leaving behind a man who was forced to confront the consequences of every callous act he had ever committed. The tension reached a fevered pitch as my words, like a finely tuned instrument, resonated within the souls of everyone present. The truth of our shared history, the delicate interplay of pain, ambition, and destiny, was laid bare in that instant. No longer could anyone in that grand hall hide behind the glittering masks of wealth and influence. In the fragile interplay of light and shadow, in the unyielding gaze of countless witnesses, the final act of this silent drama was about to unfold. And so, with every ounce of the strength I had gathered over years of struggle, I stepped forward. The echo of my footsteps on the marble floor was a testament to the long road I had traveled, a road paved with determination, sacrifice, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. The past and the present collided in that timeless moment, and the promise of a new dawn, one where the oppressors would finally be held accountable for their misdeeds, shone as brightly as the chandeliers above. I looked directly into Zane's eyes, and in that silent communion, I conveyed everything that words could not express. The weight of every tear shed, every bitter disappointment, and every small victory that had led me to this defining moment. It was not enough for me to simply reclaim my lost honor. I needed to ensure that no other soul would ever be diminished by the capricious cruelty of those who wielded power without conscience. The crowd, now fully attuned to the gravity of the unfolding scene, fell into an expectant silence. The delicate strains of the music softened further, as though the very ambience of the hall had yielded to the timeless rhythm of fate. I took another measured step forward, each movement a silent tribute to the countless hours of planning and the unspoken promise of retribution that had bound me to this moment. Tonight, I declared, my voice resonating with both empathy and resolve. We stand at the crossroads of history. Let this moment be a reminder that even the mightiest can fall, and that true redemption is found not in revenge for its own sake, but in the restoration of balance, a balance that honors both the suffering and the triumph of the human spirit. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, the words settling among the guests like seeds of change waiting to sprout. In that charged atmosphere, every eye was drawn to Zane, whose expression now bore the unmistakable marks of defeat and remorse. There was no dramatic outburst, no theatrical gesture, only a profound, soul-wrenching silence that spoke of a man who had finally been forced to confront the full measure of his own vanity. For a moment, it seemed that the entire universe held its breath, suspended in that singular, fragile interval between past transgressions and the uncertain promise of tomorrow. And as I stood there, the embodiment of years of suppressed anguish and resolute ambition, I knew that the truth had been laid bare for all to see, that the scales of justice, no matter how long they may be tipped, can always be restored when the spirit of a man refuses to be broken. In that final, suspended moment, the grand hall of the hotel became more than a mere building. It transformed into an arena of catharsis, a sacred space where the bitter past met the hopeful future. And as the light began to return to the room, softly illuminating every face with the glow of new understanding, I could see that Zane's once imperious demeanor had crumbled into a mask of contrition and regret. His eyes, once blazing with the arrogance of wealth and power, now shone with the quiet, sorrowful recognition of a man who had lost everything that truly mattered. As the applause faded into an almost reverent hush, the hotel's grand hall seemed to pulse with a new kind of energy, a silent acknowledgement that destiny was weaving its final tapestry. I felt the weight of countless memories and hard-won battles settle upon my shoulders as I continued to stand in that charged moment. The once glittering luxury around me had taken on a deeper significance, each shimmering detail now a testament to the transformative power of truth. The whispers of admiration, the furtive glances exchanged among the guests, and even the soft strains of music seemed to carry a message that nothing, not even the mightiest, was immune to the gentle, relentless force of justice. I looked around and saw faces that mirrored my own journey of quiet suffering and resilient hope. In their eyes, I recognized the unspoken stories of those who had once been marginalized, overlooked, or trampled under the heel of unchecked arrogance. And in that reflective moment, a realization struck me that my confrontation with Zane was not an isolated act of personal vindication, but a ripple that would inspire many to reclaim their own lost dignity. The thought filled me with an almost palpable warmth, a promise that every whispered injustice and every small, seemingly inconsequential slight could eventually spark a revolution of the spirit. Zane, standing amidst the crowd, appeared as if he were the epicenter of a silent storm, a storm that had stripped away the vestiges of his former grandeur. His eyes, though still catching the light of the chandeliers, now held depths of regret that no amount of wealth or power could conceal. I could almost see the countless nights he must have spent wrestling with the consequences of his actions, the faces of those he had wronged haunting him in quiet moments. And it was in that silent, soul-searching look that I sensed the beginning of his undoing, not by force or spectacle, but by the slow, inexorable process of self-realization. I resumed my measured walk across the marble floor, every step a deliberate echo of the path I had forged through years of solitude and quiet determination. My gaze shifted to the corners of the room where influential figures gathered in small clusters, their conversation now punctuated by thoughtful pauses and furtive looks in my direction. There was a transformation in the air, a subtle, yet unmistakable shift from complacency to introspection. It was as though my words had stirred something long dormant within them, a latent desire to challenge the established order of cruelty and pretense. As I neared the central dais, My mind drifted to the countless hours spent poring over ledgers and ancient tomes, to the nights of relentless planning, where every setback became a stepping stone. The journey had been long and fraught with moments of despair, yet each hardship had forged in me a resilience that could not be easily broken. I recalled the faces of those who had silently endured their own humiliations, their dreams deferred by a world that prized wealth over wisdom. In my heart, I knew that tonight was about more than personal redemption. It was a call to all who had ever been oppressed, a reminder that every soul has the right to rise, to reclaim its voice and dignity. In that moment, the hall itself seemed to lean in closer, as if eager to witness the next unfolding chapter of our shared destiny. The lights, now softened to a gentle glow, cast delicate shadows that danced along the walls, a dance that symbolized the eternal interplay between light and darkness, hope and despair. It was in that interplay that the essence of our human experience was most vividly displayed: the possibility of transformation, the courage to face one's deepest regrets, and the unyielding belief that every moment of suffering could be transmuted into a beacon of change. I raised my hand slightly, inviting a silence that was as profound as it was deliberate. In life, I began, my voice steady and imbued with the quiet power of conviction. Each of us carries the weight of our past. Each scar, each memory, is a testament to our survival. Tonight, I stand not as a harbinger of vengeance, but as an emissary of hope. For in the crucible of adversity, we find the strength to transform, to rebuild, and to forge a future that honors both our pain and our potential. Every word resonated, and in that instant, the hall seemed to hold its breath. Zane's gaze dropped lower, as if unable to meet the truth of my proclamation. In that silent admission, I sensed a deep, internal reckoning taking root, a slow dissolution of the defenses built over years of unchallenged dominance. His posture, once rigid and defiant, now betrayed a vulnerability that spoke volumes of the inner tumult he was experiencing. A murmur of understanding swept through the room. The murmurs, though soft, carried the unmistakable promise of a change that could no longer be postponed. In that charged atmosphere, the lines between oppressor and oppressed began to blur, replaced by the shared human truth that pride and cruelty are but fleeting illusions when measured against the enduring spirit of redemption. I continued, my words weaving a tapestry that stretched beyond the confines of the opulent hall. Let us remember that every act of arrogance plants the seeds of its own undoing. Every slight, every moment of cruelty is counterbalanced by the resilience of the human spirit. Tonight, we celebrate not the fall of a single man, but the awakening of a collective truth that the greatest triumph is not in domination, but in the capacity to forgive, to learn, and to rise above our past. The atmosphere was electric, a silent, powerful promise that the very fabric of society could be rewoven with threads of compassion and truth. And as I looked into the eyes of those gathered, I knew that this moment, though born from a single act of retribution, would echo in the lives of many, igniting the embers of change that would one day set the world alight with justice. In the wake of that impassioned declaration, a new current of energy swept over the Grand Hall, transforming every whispered thought into a tangible force of resolve. The air, heavy with emotion and unspoken promises, seemed to vibrate with the sound of change, a sound that resonated deeply with each soul present. As I stood there, bathed in the soft, amber glow of the chandeliers, I could feel the years of solitary planning, every moment of pain and perseverance, converging into this single, electrifying instant. The journey had been long and arduous, yet every hardship and every scar had led me to this moment of unyielding truth. Zane, still reeling from the confrontation with his own crumbling facade, slowly sank into a state of introspection. The once confident lines of his face were now softened by regret and disbelief. His eyes, which had previously flashed with the ruthless spark of unchecked ambition, now darted about the room as though searching for an escape from the inevitable reckoning. Every gaze from the assembly seemed to pierce him, a silent indictment of his past transgressions and a mirror reflecting the collective discontent of those who had suffered beneath his reign. The silence that enveloped him was not a passive absence, but a forceful, all-consuming presence, a testament to the gravity of the moment. I could see in the faces of the guests a subtle metamorphosis taking shape. The glitter of opulence no longer concealed the deep fissures of a system built on inequality and callous disregard. The eyes of those who had long suffered in silence were now alight with a fervent, unspoken determination. In that charged atmosphere, the Grand Hall was transformed from a mere arena of lavish festivities into a crucible of change, where every whispered secret of past injustices was given voice, and every silent cry for justice was finally heard. As I moved further into the midst of the assembly, I could sense the weight of every personal struggle and every quiet defiance that had accumulated over the years. My footsteps, measured and resolute on the marble floor, became a rhythmic echo of all the long nights spent in isolation, meticulously plotting the dismantling of a corrupt order. The pain I had once felt was now distilled into a pure, unyielding resolve, a resolve that had grown in strength with every betrayal, every dismissive sneer, every act of public humiliation. Each step I took was a reclamation of what was once taken, a silent assertion that no man, no matter how mighty, could forever hide behind the facade of untouchable wealth and power. I paused at the center of the room, where a lone beam of light seemed to spotlight not only my figure, but the raw essence of the confrontation that had long been brewing. With deliberate calm, I began to speak once more, a voice that now carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom and an unwavering commitment to a greater cause. Tonight, I said, my tone both soothing and resolute, we stand at the precipice of a new era, an era in which the truth, however long suppressed, rises to claim its rightful place in the tapestry of our shared existence. The words, simple yet laden with purpose, rippled across the room like a wave of awakening. Every person present, from the influential magnates to the quietly observant, felt that the words were meant for them, a call to awaken, to resist the tyranny of pride and indifference, and to reclaim their dignity from the clutches of a system that had long thrived on subjugation. The Grand Hall, with its ornate furnishings and elegant decor, was now but a backdrop to a greater drama, one in which the essence of human resilience and hope was on full display. As the soft murmur of contemplation began to swell into an undercurrent of collective resolve, I continued to recount the journey that had led me to this defining moment. I spoke not only of my own trials and tribulations, but also of the countless souls who had silently borne the weight of injustice. I wove into my narrative the struggles of the unseen and the unheard, the daily battles fought in the shadows of a society that celebrated superficial opulence while neglecting the suffering beneath. Every syllable was a testament to the belief that true power lies not in the accumulation of wealth or the exercise of unchecked authority, but in the courage to confront one's past and to rise, unbowed, in pursuit of justice. The tension in the room deepened as I recounted how every setback had been a lesson, every act of humiliation a spark that had kindled the flame of transformation. I described the nights of solitary contemplation where the pain of my past had been transmuted into a driving force, an internal alchemy that had transformed despair into determination. I recalled the moments when hope seemed a distant memory, yet through sheer will and unyielding perseverance, I had unearthed a reservoir of strength that now surged through me like an unstoppable tide. Each word was a bridge between the dark past and the luminous promise of a future where dignity and respect would prevail over arrogance and cruelty. All the while, Zane remained in a state of quiet disarray, his once impenetrable armor of superiority now reduced to fragments of doubt and remorse. His eyes, which had once commanded attention and awe, now flickered with a haunted uncertainty. It was in that unguarded moment, when the weight of every misdeed pressed down upon him, that I saw the final vestiges of his resistance begin to crumble. The transformation was not violent or explosive. Rather, it was a slow, inexorable unraveling, as the truth of his past actions seeped into every corner of his being, leaving no place untouched by the cold hand of accountability. The guests, too, found themselves in the midst of this unfolding metamorphosis. Conversations that had once been steeped in the superficial trappings of wealth and social status now carried an undercurrent of introspection and urgency. Faces that had long been masked by the polished veneer of societal propriety now revealed the raw emotions of individuals awakened to the possibility of a new, more just order. There was a palpable sense that, in that moment, the forces of destiny and conscience were aligning to overturn the old order and pave the way for a renaissance of truth. I took another step forward, this time directly toward Zane, whose gaze remained locked in a silent, desperate plea for redemption. The distance between us, once a chasm carved by years of indifference and cruelty, now seemed to shrink with each measured stride. I spoke once more, my voice a blend of gentle compassion and firm resolve. Every act of cruelty, every moment of arrogance, plants the seed of its own demise. Tonight, as we stand together in the light of truth, let us cast aside the old order, a system built on the suffering of the few at the expense of the many, and embrace a future where compassion, accountability, and shared humanity reign supreme. A profound stillness descended upon the room, a silence that was as much an embrace as it was a judgment. It was a silence that acknowledged the deep wounds of the past, while simultaneously heralding the promise of healing and renewal. In that charged interval, I saw not only Zane's silent capitulation, but also the dawning realization in the eyes of the onlookers that they, too, had the power to rise above the injustices that had long defined their lives. And so, with every word that resonated like a solemn bell across the marble expanse, the truth of our intertwined destinies was laid bare. The hotel, once a sanctuary of opulence for the privileged few, was transformed into a stage where the mighty were held to account and the resilient were celebrated. The transformation was not the product of a single act of revenge, but of a collective awakening, a silent revolution that had been years in the making, nurtured in the hearts of those who had long suffered in the shadows. As I drew the final breath of that poignant declaration, the atmosphere shifted once more. The guests, their faces alight with a newfound clarity and determination, began to murmur among themselves, a chorus of voices rising in unison, echoing the promise of a reimagined world. The Grand Hall, with its opulent decor and glittering facade, had become more than a mere repository of past glories. It was now a symbol of the inexorable power of truth and the resilience of the human spirit. In that luminous moment, as the echoes of my words intertwined with the silent pledge of the gathered souls, I knew that the journey was far from over. Zane's downfall was not a spectacle to be savored in isolation, but a catalyst, a spark that would ignite a fire of transformation far beyond these gilded walls. And though the path ahead remained uncertain and fraught with challenges, the collective determination in that room promised that every injustice would one day be met with the steadfast, unyielding force of truth. Thus, as the soft glow of the chandeliers bathed us in their timeless light and the echoes of the past merged with the promise of tomorrow, a new chapter began, one defined not by the bitterness of retribution, but by the hope of a future where every soul could rise, unburdened by the weight of humiliation, to embrace a destiny forged in the crucible of shared resilience and unwavering truth. In the wake of that profound declaration, as if the very fabric of the night had shifted, the Grand Hall fell into a temporary suspension, a moment where time itself hesitated to continue its relentless march. The interplay of light and shadow danced upon every face, and for a brief eternity, the silence was more eloquent than the grandest of speeches. In that fragile pause, a singular truth seemed to hang in the air, that even the most formidable towers of pride could be brought low by the quiet persistence of the human spirit. I stepped away from the dais, the echoes of my voice still reverberating off the gleaming marble, and began to traverse the room with a deliberate calm. Every step felt charged with the memories of a long and arduous journey, a journey that had seen me rise from the depths of humiliation to the pinnacle of a self-forged destiny. The faces that turned to follow my progress were not those of the idle rich and indifferent elites, but of souls stirred awake, each recognizing in my eyes the spark of a shared, unspoken struggle. There is a sense of collective defiance, a whisper of rebellion that permeated the crowd, as though every individual was mentally shedding the layers of resignation that had so long clung to them. Across the room, Zane lingered in the lingering gloom near an ornate window. The view beyond showcased the city's twinkling lights, but for him, those lights seemed dim and distant, mere reflections of a past splendor now eclipsed by his own inner turmoil. His posture was one of defeated isolation, a stark contrast to the commanding aura he had once projected. It was in that moment, as I approached him slowly through the sea of onlookers, that I sensed the full measure of the transformation unfolding before our very eyes. His eyes, heavy with regret and an almost palpable sense of impending reckoning, met mine once more. There was no need for harsh words or confrontational gestures. Our silence spoke volumes. In that silent communion, the inevitability of his undoing was laid bare, a slow and quiet crumbling of a fortress built upon cruelty and arrogance. I moved closer, feeling the weight of each deliberate step, until I was mere paces away from the man who had once been the embodiment of my deepest humiliation. My voice, softer now, yet resonant with a finality that brooked no dispute, broke the silence. "Zane," I said, the single word imbued with all the years of pain, resolve, and transformation. "Tonight, you stand at the crossroads of your own making. Every action, every slight against another soul has led you to this moment." The word hung between us like a gavel, marking the instant of irrevocable change. The crowd seemed to lean in collectively, as if each person was privy to a secret that was at once both ancient and brand new. A low murmur began to ripple through the gathering, a murmur that carried the weight of many unspoken truths and years of pent-up frustration. It was the sound of the oppressed asserting their right to be heard, a quiet but insistent reminder that no man, no matter how steeped in wealth or authority, could forever silence the spirit of those he had wronged. Zane's face, so accustomed to the cold mask of arrogance, now revealed a landscape of inner turmoil. His eyes darted to the faces around him, as though desperately seeking refuge or perhaps forgiveness, but finding none. The transformation was as inevitable as it was irrevocable. A man who had once ruled his world with an iron fist was now forced to confront the myriad souls whose lives he had so callously disregarded. In that silent moment, the grandeur of the hall, the sparkle of crystal chandeliers, and the polished veneer of wealth all seemed to dissolve into insignificance before the unyielding power of truth. I took a step closer still, my heart pounding in a cadence that matched the fervor of the moment. "I stand before you," I continued, "not to cast judgment, but to reveal that the path of cruelty leads only to isolation, and the pursuit of vengeance, when tempered with truth, could transform even the darkest of hearts." My words carried with them a blend of empathy and resolve, the recognition that while the scales of justice might be long in coming, they were never truly absent. In that charged atmosphere, each syllable was a thread, weaving together the fractured lives of those who had suffered and the hopeful promise of renewal. Around us, the crowd absorbed every word, their expressions ranging from pained reminiscence to resolute determination. A woman in a deep burgundy gown, her eyes glistening with both tears and a hardened resolve, nodded slowly as if affirming that her own story was now entwined with mine. An older gentleman, whose lined face spoke of decades spent weathering the storms of injustice, murmured softly in agreement. The collective human energy in that moment was a testament to the fact that no single life exists in isolation. Our paths, though diverse, converge on the common ground of shared struggle and the relentless desire for dignity. Yet, even as the moment grew charged with this unifying power, a subtle tension wove its way through the room. It was the tension of an impending reckoning that not only beckoned change, but demanded it. A pair of younger men, their eyes alight with the fire of unspent ambition, exchanged glances that carried an almost palpable challenge to the old order. In their silent communication, I saw the promise of a future where the wounds of the past might finally heal, replaced by a collective strength that dared to envision a more just world. In that intricate tapestry of emotion, I sensed that the moment was far from over. There was still a story left to tell, a final chapter that would encapsulate the journey of transformation and reveal the deeper truth that had been gathering like storm clouds on the horizon. I spoke once more, my voice softening yet growing ever more resolute. The path to redemption is not paved with empty apologies or the mere recognition of past wrongs. It is forged in the crucible of accountability, a fire that burns away the falsehoods of pride and leaves behind the pure essence of truth. At these words, Zane's eyes flickered with a mix of pain and introspection. It was as if he were witnessing, for the first time, the tangible impact of his choices, not only on himself but on every life that had crossed his path. The hall, once a stage for superficial grandeur, had metamorphosed into a sanctuary of shared vulnerability and emerging hope. Each guest, each observer, was now a witness to a transformation that transcended personal vendettas and became a universal call for a reimagined order, one that celebrated the human spirit over the transient glimmer of wealth. A slow exhalation, almost imperceptible at first, began to ripple through the assembled crowd, a collective breath as if the world itself were pausing to contemplate the magnitude of what had transpired. And then, in a cascade of subtle but profound gestures, the room began to shift once more. The murmur of voices grew into a steady cadence, a chorus of resolve that spoke not just of retribution, but of healing, of a future replete with the promise that every scar could be a mark of survival and every tear a tribute to the indomitable strength within us all. As I took one final, deliberate step towards Zane, the distance between us seemed to vanish entirely. In that intimate proximity, with the entire room as our silent audience, I reached out, not with a hand of hostility, but with one of unexpected compassion. "Zane," I whispered, my tone laden with both the gravity of our shared history and the glimmer of a possibility for redemption. "It is not too late to embrace the truth, to relinquish the weight of pride that binds you, and to join in the journey towards a future where every heart can mend." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Zane's eyes, reflecting a tumult of regret and an unspoken plea, flickered with the possibility of change. The moment stretched, taut and fragile, as if the universe itself were waiting for his response. The room, once defined by opulence and superficial accolades, was now a crucible for metamorphosis, a place where the past was neither condemned nor forgotten, but transformed into a stepping stone for the future. In that suspended second, I realized that the true measure of victory was not in the downfall of an oppressor, but in the capacity to inspire a collective awakening, a call for each person to rise, to challenge the injustices that had long been tolerated, and to rebuild their lives on the foundation of compassion and accountability. The air thrummed with the silent promise that change, once ignited, would spread like wildfire, consuming the old order and giving birth to a dawn that celebrated the dignity of every soul. And so, as the murmurs of the crowd swelled into an anthem of newfound resolve, the grand hall, bathed in the soft glow of twilight filtering through its stained glass windows, became more than a monument to past glories. It transformed into a beacon of hope, a sanctuary where the scars of history were not hidden but honored as the marks of resilience. The night had become a canvas on which the intricate interplay of pain and redemption was being painted with strokes of raw honesty and unyielding determination. With each passing moment, the tension in the room shifted from one of accusatory silence to that of collaborative rebirth, a subtle, yet powerful reordering of priorities. In that charged atmosphere, even the most hardened hearts were given pause, compelled to confront their own roles in the tapestry of injustice. The palpable energy of collective transformation rippled outward, promising that the legacy of this night would be one of healing and profound change. As I slowly withdrew my hand, leaving Zane to confront the reflection of his own choices in the sea of expectant faces, I knew that this was only the beginning of a broader awakening. The seeds of transformation had been sown, and though the journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty and challenge, the spark of hope had been kindled in the hearts of those present. In that decisive moment, the boundaries between oppressor and oppressed dissolved into a shared commitment to rebuild a future defined not by the arrogance of the few, but by the resilient spirit of every human soul. The night pressed on, and with it came a quiet promise that echoes of this transformative encounter would reverberate far beyond the gilded walls of the hotel. In every whispered conversation, in every tearful glance exchanged between kindred spirits, there lay the unspoken vow that no injustice would go unchallenged, and that every soul, no matter how battered, would one day rise to claim the dignity it so rightfully deserved. The hours slipped into a quiet, almost surreal cadence, as if the night itself were holding its breath in anticipation of what was yet to unfold. The air in the grand hall, once charged with the intensity of confrontation, now settled into a reflective stillness, a space where memories, regrets, and hopes mingled like soft shadows in the half-light. Guests who had once played their parts in the grand spectacle of wealth and superficial grandeur now appeared transformed, their faces and postures softened with the tender glow of introspection. I found myself once again drawn to a quiet corner of the room, a place where the interplay of muted lamplight and lingering twilight revealed details often unnoticed amid the grandeur. Here, in the subtle interplay of light and darkness, I began to see the silent stories of every soul present, stories of loss, of resilience, and above all, of an unyielding determination to overcome the burdens of the past. There, in that quiet space, the true heart of the evening beat steadily. Its pulse the promise of a new beginning that had been sown through the trials of hardship and the courage to face one's own demons. As I observed the small gatherings of individuals exchanging glances of understanding and quiet camaraderie, I recalled the lonely nights that had once defined my own path. Every moment of isolation had taught me that the deepest transformation is born not from grand gestures, but from the quiet, persistent resolve to forge meaning out of suffering. It was this very resolve that had set me on a course to reclaim not only my dignity, but also to awaken those around me to the possibility of a collective redemption, a shared journey that transcended individual vendettas. The soft murmur of conversation grew, now infused with hope and the tentative promise of change. Conversations that had once revolved solely around the superficialities of wealth and status began to touch upon themes of accountability, empathy, and the transformative power of truth. I saw familiar faces light up with the realization that every shared hardship had the potential to become a catalyst for something greater. A future where the cycle of humiliation could finally be broken by the bonds of understanding and mutual respect. It was then that I noticed a subtle shift in the demeanor of Zane. No longer did he cling desperately to the remnants of his former authority. Instead, his eyes, though still heavy with regret, began to glisten with the faint, hesitant light of introspection. His once impenetrable armor of pride had fractured, revealing the vulnerability of man confronted by the magnitude of his own actions. In the quiet recesses of his expression, I could sense the stirring of a long-dormant awareness, a realization that the path to redemption was open, albeit shrouded in the shadows of his past transgressions. Compelled by a force that was both gentle and insistent, I moved toward him once more, not with the aim of further admonition, but with the quiet intent to offer him a path, a chance to step away from the ruins of his former self and embrace the possibility of transformation. My footsteps, now measured and imbued with the serenity of hard-won acceptance, carried me through the ebb and flow of the gathering. Every glance I encountered spoke of the collective hope that had been ignited this night, hope that justice and empathy could together mend the deepest of wounds. Standing beside Zane, I offered him a look that conveyed both the gravity of our shared history and the possibility of a future unburdened by the relentless weight of past misdeeds. "This night," I said softly, ensuring that my voice carried the sincere timbre of reconciliation as much as it did the resolve for accountability, "is not solely a moment of reckoning for you, but a testament to the capacity we all have to change. In the crucible of regret, there lies an opportunity, a chance to rebuild what has been lost and to honor the truth that each of us is capable of transformation." My words were met with a silence that was heavy with contemplation. Zane's eyes, for the first time in many long years, seemed to search for something beyond mere absolution. A hint of hope, perhaps, that redemption was not an unattainable dream, but a path illuminated by the willingness to confront one's own shortcomings. The moment felt delicate, as if every word spoken was a thread stitching together the fragmented tapestry of broken lives, mending them into a pattern of shared resilience. Around us, the ambience shifted subtly, as if the very architecture of the hall responded to this quiet communion. The ornate details of the room, the intricately carved moldings, the soft luminescence of crystal chandeliers, and the gentle interplay of shadow and light, seemed to echo the profound truth that every end could be the genesis of a new beginning. It was as if the hotel, once a stage for unbridled vanity and cruelty, was itself undergoing a metamorphosis, opening its heart to the possibility of healing and transformation. As the night deepened, the murmurs of conversation grew into a soft, collective hymn, a song of hope that resonated from every corner of the grand hall. In that chorus of shared humanity, I could sense the stirring of a profound movement, a quiet revolution born not of overt rebellion, but of the subtle, unwavering commitment to rise above the forces that had long sought to divide us. The resilience that had been nurtured in the hidden recesses of our souls now found expression in every word spoken, every tear shed, and every smile that hinted at a rekindled belief in the power of redemption. I paused once more, feeling the weight of the night and the promise of a future yet unwritten. In the reflective surfaces of polished marble and mirrored walls, I saw not only my own journey etched in fleeting moments of sorrow and strength, but also the countless faces of those who had, in their own quiet ways, borne witness to the long, arduous path from despair to hope. It was then that I realized that true victory was not measured solely by the downfall of a once haughty oppressor, but by the transformation of every individual who dared to confront the truth, to acknowledge their pain, and to embrace the possibility of change. Zane's gaze, still heavy with regret, slowly lifted to meet the eyes of those around him. In that exchange, there was an unspoken acknowledgement of the shared responsibility for a past marked by injustice, and a tentative promise to forge a new path, a path illuminated by the collective strength of every person who believed in the dignity of the human spirit. His posture, once rigid with the weight of unrepentant pride, now softened as he seemed to draw in the energy of the room, a silent plea for the courage to change, and perhaps a fragile hope that redemption might yet be possible. The hall, once a silent witness to the theatrics of wealth and cruelty, now vibrated with the quiet hum of transformation. In every whispered word, every soft exhale of hope, the promise of a new dawn was unmistakable, a dawn where every scar, every moment of humiliation would serve not as a mark of defeat, but as a testament to the indomitable will of the human soul to rise, to mend, and to create a future defined by compassion and understanding. And so, as the night continued its gentle, inexorable journey toward the promise of dawn, the grand hall stood as a sanctuary for transformation, a place where the echoes of the past merged with the whispered hopes of tomorrow. In that sacred space, beneath the soft glow of twilight and amidst the reflective gaze of countless witnesses, a silent revolution was underway. It was a revolution not of violent upheaval, but of the quiet, steadfast transformation of every heart that chose to face its own truth, to embrace its shared vulnerability, and to step boldly into the promise of redemption. As the first blush of dawn began to seep through the tall, arched windows of the grand hall, a new chapter seemed to unfurl before us, one that bore the promise of resolution and the gentle healing of old wounds. The previous hours of confrontation, confession, and quiet transformation had left an indelible mark on every soul present. Now, in the soft early light, the hall took on an almost ethereal quality. Shadows receded, replaced by the warm glow of hope that stretched across the marble floor and up the intricate carvings on the walls. It was as if the very architecture of the place had been cleansed by the spirit of redemption that had taken hold the night before. I stood in the center of the space, feeling the cool caress of dawn mingling with the lingering energy of the evening. Around me, the crowd was no longer a mere assembly of the wealthy and the influential, but had evolved into a mosaic of lives intertwined by shared struggle and collective aspiration. Their eyes, now bright with the possibility of change, bore witness to the transformative journey that had already reshaped our understanding of pride and penance. In that fragile moment between night and day, I found myself reflecting on the path that had led me to this hallowed space. Each step, from the crushing humiliation inflicted upon me so many years ago to the painstaking nights spent studying, planning, and nurturing a seed of resolve, had been a thread in the grand tapestry of my existence. I recalled the painful memory of that fateful day in the hotel when a rich man, in his haughty cruelty, had ridiculed me before an entire assembly. That day, a wound had been inflicted upon my soul, a wound that, over time, had been tended to with both sorrow and quiet determination. It was in that crucible of humiliation that I had vowed silently to reclaim my dignity, not by a burst of unbridled violence, but by a slow and steady reclamation of power through perseverance and introspection. And so, with the first rays of sunlight glimmering on the ornate surfaces, I took another deliberate step forward, a step that was as much a declaration of my own rebirth as it was an invitation for others to join in this collective emergence from the darkness of past injustices. My eyes scanned the room, catching the hopeful glances of those who had long endured their own silent battles. There was a palpable shift in the air, a sense that every person present was now, in some small way, ready to be part of something larger than themselves, a movement toward a more equitable and compassionate future. At the heart of this transformation stood Zane, the man whose arrogance had once ruled these halls with an iron fist. In the waning darkness of the previous night, his defiant posture had given way to a profound vulnerability, and now, in the tender light of morning, that vulnerability deepened into a quiet resignation. His eyes, once so full of defiant disdain, now held a sorrow that spoke of regret and the heavy cost of his past misdeeds. In his gaze, I saw the beginnings of a man who might yet find redemption, a man who, having been stripped of his ill-gotten power, could choose to rebuild his life on a foundation of humility and genuine contrition. Moved by the silent hope that pulsed in the room, I slowly advanced toward him. My footsteps echoed softly as I approached, each step measured and imbued with the gravity of all that had transpired. I extended my hand in a gesture that transcended the simplistic binaries of vengeance and retribution. "Zane," I said quietly, my voice gentle, yet carrying the firm timbre of finality. "Today marks the threshold of a new beginning, not just for you, but for every soul gathered here. We have borne witness to the pain of our past, and now we stand together at the doorway of redemption. It is within our power to transform our scars into the roadmap for a future where compassion prevails over cruelty. In that instant, a collective murmur rippled through the room. A murmur that was both an affirmation of the possibility of change and a quiet, resolute challenge to the old order. Eyes glistened with unshed tears, and nascent smiles broke through the weariness etched on many faces. In that luminous moment, I could see that the true victory lay not in the spectacular downfall of an oppressor, but in the humble, often arduous journey of healing that followed acknowledgement of one's wrongs. Zane's features, etched with lines of regret and the weight of innumerable missteps, softened further as he regarded my outstretched hand. For a long, breathless moment, silence reigned, an unspoken dialogue passing between us that was as potent as any declaration. The tension that had once been a weapon in our shared history now gave way to a tentative embrace of reconciliation. In that fragile instant, it seemed as though the myriad forces of destiny had converged to offer him, and indeed all of us, a second chance. As the early light warmed the room, the guests slowly began to disperse from the central dais, carrying with them the seed of that transformative encounter. Conversations sparked in hushed corners, and groups formed with renewed determination to address not only the injustices of the past, but to craft a future where every individual's voice was cherished. The Grand Hall, once a stage for the ostentatious display of wealth and disdain, had been reborn as a sanctuary for reflection, accountability, and above all, hope. In the quiet aftermath of that monumental shift, I found solace in the knowledge that every step taken along this winding path, every act of defiance against the forces of humiliation, had led us to this defining moment. Though the journey was far from over, the dawning light signified that change was no longer an abstract dream, but a tangible reality unfolding before our eyes. The promise of a future where the chains of past oppressions could be broken was palpable, a promise nurtured by the collective resilience of those who had dared to rise. In the days that followed, as the hotel slowly returned to its daily rhythm, the echoes of that transformative night continued to reverberate. Meetings were held in quiet rooms away from prying eyes, where ideas of reform and restitution took root. Old alliances were challenged and new bonds formed, as the shared experience of witnessing the fall of unchecked arrogance and the rise of humble contrition wove its way into the very fabric of our lives. Zane, now a figure both pitied and respected for his willingness to confront his past, embarked on a journey of self-reinvention. He began by addressing those he had wronged, an arduous process fraught with pain and the constant reminder of lost opportunities. In those conversations, there was no grand spectacle of remorse, no overblown declarations. There was simply a raw, honest exchange that sought to bridge the chasm between regret and redemption. And in each hesitant, sincere apology, there emerged a glimmer of the possibility that even the deepest wounds could, with time and effort, begin to heal. For me, the journey had taken on an even deeper significance. I had transformed not merely through the reclamation of my own dignity, but by igniting a movement that challenged the very essence of the societal hierarchies that had once bound us all. The story of that long ago humiliation, the memory of a man broken before an audience, had been rewritten into a narrative of hope, resilience, and the profound strength that lies within the human spirit when it dares to confront its darkest moments. Now, as I looked around at the faces that had gathered in the soft glow of morning, I saw not the remnants of a past marred by cruelty, but the radiant promise of a future shaped by collective empathy and steadfast resolve. Every whispered conversation, every tentative handshake, and every determined glance spoke of lives no longer defined by the shadows of old transgressions, but by the light of newfound purpose. In that moment, the Grand Hall, with all its history of opulence and public spectacle, had become a living testament to the enduring truth that redemption is possible, even for those who have once wielded their power with callous disregard. And so, As the day fully broke, casting its golden rays upon a world reborn in the quiet aftermath of night's revelations, I knew that this was not the end of our story, but merely the beginning of a journey that would continue to evolve with each passing day. The promise of transformation, etched into the hearts of every individual present, would carry us forward, urging us to confront injustice wherever it reared its head, and to always remember that even the deepest scars could one day serve as the foundation for a brighter, more compassionate tomorrow. In the weeks that followed that transformative dawn, the world outside the Grand Hotel began to mirror the changes within its walls. The once aloof mansion of wealth had evolved into a vibrant forum for honest conversation and genuine reform. I often found myself returning to the hotel, not as a stage for my past humiliation, but as a beacon of a new era. Here, in its resplendent corridors now suffused with a warm light of hope, lives were being rewritten. Every day, as I walked past the gleaming facade, I could sense a subtle shift in the air. The whispers of the past had softened into murmurs of promise. In quiet meetings held in newly designated rooms, former guests, some of whom had once been mere spectators to the cruel spectacle, now gathered to deliberate on ways to create lasting change. They spoke of policies that would ensure fairness, of partnerships to mend broken communities, and of initiatives to support those who had long been sidelined by society's relentless pursuit of wealth. In these hushed yet determined conversations, the spirit of accountability and regeneration took root. Zane, whose transformation had become the catalyst for this broader awakening, worked tirelessly to restore what had been lost, not just his own reputation, but the trust of those he had once wronged. Each day, he visited community centers, engaged in dialogues with local leaders, and, in earnest humility, began to shoulder the burden of reparative actions. His path was neither easy nor immediate. At times, the ghosts of his past misdeeds would return in the form of skeptical glances and harsh words. Yet, with every step of genuine atonement, he chipped away at the monolith of his former arrogance. I, too, found myself compelled to share my story further, not to glorify the act of retribution, but to underscore a deeper truth. That true transformation begins within, nurtured by resilience and a steadfast commitment to righting wrongs. I traveled to gatherings, recounting the quiet rebellion of that fateful day in the hotel. The humiliation that had once scorched my spirit had, over the years, been transmuted into a wellspring of strength and wisdom. My words, now tempered with the experiences of both triumph and vulnerability, resonated with those who had long carried their own hidden burdens. As the seasons turned, the hotel became a living archive of this slow and arduous journey. Its walls bore witness to not only extravagant banquets of the past, but to humble meetings, soulful apologies, and the gentle clamor of community voices uniting for a better future. The chandeliers that once gleamed solely as emblems of opulence now illuminated rooms filled with discussions on education, healthcare, and social justice. In this reimagined space, art and literature found new life as instruments for healing. A mural depicting the rise of the human spirit was commissioned, and poetry readings became a cherished weekly event, each recitation a testament to the resilience of those who dared to dream of change. Amid these shifts, a particular evening remains etched in my memory, a night when the hotel hosted a community forum open to all. In the softly lit ballroom, where echoes of past grandeur now intertwined with vibrant new ideas, people from every walk of life gathered. There was an electricity in the air as community members, former elites, and humble workers sat side by side, sharing their stories and visions for tomorrow. For many, the hotel had become more than a building. It was a symbol of transformation, a testament that even the deepest wounds could be healed through honest dialogue and collective resolve. On that night, as I stood on a modest stage set up in one corner of the hall, I looked out over a sea of expectant faces. I spoke with a sincerity that bridged years of isolation and bitterness, urging everyone present to view our collective past not as a chain that bound us, but as a foundation upon which to build a future defined by empathy and justice. I recalled the long, winding path that had brought me here, each setback, every act of cruelty I'd suffered, and the relentless pursuit of dignity that had fueled my journey. I urged the assembled crowd to harness their own experiences of suffering as the impetus for change, to transform their scars into symbols of hope and renewal. As the night deepened, the conversations grew more animated. Ideas flowed freely, a tapestry of thoughts ranging from practical community initiatives to philosophical debates on the nature of redemption. Zane, once the epitome of unyielding pride, sat in a corner with a small group of former adversaries, engaging in a heartfelt dialogue that bridged past enmities with tentative plans for collaborative progress. There was no grand pronouncement of victory. Instead, there was the slow, steady work of healing, a recognition that while the past could never be entirely erased, its lessons could guide us toward a more compassionate tomorrow. That evening, beneath the soft glow of modest lighting and surrounded by the gentle hum of communal effort, the hotel shed its former identity. It was no longer a monument to the excesses of the privileged few, but had become a crucible where diverse voices converged in the pursuit of collective redemption. The legacy of that day, where humiliation once reigned supreme, had been transformed into a living narrative of accountability, resilience, and the transformative power of truth. In the quiet aftermath of the forum, as people lingered in small clusters, sharing final thoughts and promising to carry the spirit of the night into their daily lives, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. I had learned, as had so many others, that revenge need not be the endpoint of suffering. Instead, from the depths of despair could emerge a force for lasting change, a force driven not by the desire to see an enemy crumble, but by the unwavering belief that every heart, no matter how wounded, holds the potential for redemption. Walking back through the corridors of the hotel that morning, now alight with the subdued brilliance of hope and the hum of renewed purpose, I carried with me the quiet certainty that this was not the end of our story. The journey of transformation would continue, woven into the fabric of everyday life, as each individual committed to the slow, deliberate work of healing and justice. And as the hotel's legacy evolved, so too did the lives of those who had once gathered within its opulent halls. Each step forward a testament to the power of compassion, accountability, and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the hotel, once a symbol of my deepest humiliation, became something else entirely. It was no longer just a place where power was flaunted, where the rich trampled on the pride of others. No, it had evolved into a sanctuary for second chances, a living reminder that even the most painful wounds could be transformed into the seeds of something greater. Zane, the man who had once humiliated me in front of everyone, was no longer the proud, cold-hearted tyrant he had been. Every time I visited the hotel, I saw him working quietly, his face lined with the weight of his regrets. He was no longer the towering figure who had once crushed me beneath his arrogance. No, now he was a man in the process of rebuilding, not just his business, but his soul. One day, as I stood near the grand staircase, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Can we talk?" Zane asked, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it before. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. There was no trace of the smugness he once wore like armor. Instead, there was something else, a vulnerability and honesty I had never thought I'd see. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone calm. He exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "I was a fool," he admitted. "That day, the way I treated you in front of everyone." His voice faltered. "I wanted to feel powerful, and the only way I knew how was by making others feel small. But I was wrong about everything." I didn't speak right away. I wanted his words to hang there, to settle between us. I had dreamt of this moment for so long, a confession, an apology. But now that it was here, it felt different. "Why now?" I finally asked. "After everything, why are you telling me this?" Zane's shoulders slumped slightly. Because I see it now. I see the harm I've done, and I don't want to be that person anymore. He hesitated before adding, I know I can't erase the past, but maybe I can do better moving forward. For a long time, I stood there processing his words. I had imagined confronting him 1,000 times, but the man before me was not the monster from my memories. He was just human, flawed, broken, trying. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, I finally said. But words are only the beginning. What matters is what you do next. A faint, grateful smile touched his lips. I'm willing to prove it. And he did. In the months that followed, Zane worked harder than anyone else to transform the hotel. He opened its doors to community events, offered mentorship programs for young people from underprivileged backgrounds, and donated a portion of the hotel's profits to charitable causes. Where there had once been arrogance, there was now humility. Where there had been cold indifference, there was now compassion. I watched it all unfold, and something inside me began to shift. The anger and resentment I had carried for so long began to loosen their grip. I realized that the true victory wasn't in watching Zane suffer. It was in knowing that I had risen above the pain he had inflicted, and that, in some way, he was trying to rise too. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the hotel in a warm golden glow, I found myself standing on the balcony overlooking the bustling city. I felt free, not because I had won some battle of pride, but because I had let go of the burden I'd carried for so long. Zane joined me a few moments later. Thank you, he said softly. I turned to him, surprised. For what? For giving me a chance to make things right. I studied his face, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Everyone deserves a second chance, I said quietly, as long as they're willing to earn it. And with that, the weight of our shared past finally lifted. The hotel stood as a testament to our journey, a place once defined by pride and cruelty, now reborn as a symbol of redemption and hope. And as I walked away from that balcony, I knew that my story was no longer about revenge. It was about something far greater, the power of transformation, and the belief that even the most broken among us can find their way back to the light.